I was excited. I had been planning this moment for months, working up the courage and organizing every little detail to make sure it was perfect. We had been in a long-distance relationship for over a year now, and while the miles between us had been difficult, we had always managed to make it work. We talked every day, FaceTimed each other, and sent messages whenever we could. She was my everything, and I was ready to take the next step. It wasn't just a casual relationship anymore. I loved her, and I knew she loved me too. I wanted to marry her, and I had a ring ready in my pocket. The thought of her face when she saw it was the only thing keeping me going through the stress of the past few weeks. I had bought the tickets a few weeks ago. It was all a surprise. I didn't tell her I was coming. I just wanted to show up unannounced and sweep her off her feet. A proposal in her own apartment. I had imagined it 1,000 times in my head, running through what I would say and how it would all unfold. I couldn't wait for the moment when I dropped to one knee and asked her to be my wife. I was already in the airport, bags packed, the ring tucked safely in my jacket pocket. I had no idea how the day would unfold, but I knew it would be a day I would remember for the rest of my life. I had so much faith in our relationship. I couldn't imagine anything going wrong. She was the one. I was certain. When I landed, I didn't tell her. I didn't call or message. I just took a cab straight to her apartment. It felt like the most romantic gesture. This would be something she'd never forget. I stood outside her door, my heart pounding with excitement. I took a deep breath and knocked. I could hear movement on the other side. Her voice, a familiar sound I had grown so accustomed to. She had no idea what was coming. I smiled to myself, imagining her surprise when she opened the door. But the door swung open, and what I saw completely shattered everything. She wasn't standing there in a sweet dress or in her usual smile. Instead, she was in her lingerie, but she wasn't alone. A man was with her. His arm was wrapped around her waist, and they were standing so close together that it looked like they had been caught in a moment of intimacy. It wasn't the sight I had imagined when I thought about what I'd find. My breath caught in my throat. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The reality of what I was seeing didn't register at first. I stared at her. She saw me, and her face drained of color. She stepped away from the guy, quickly pulling away as if trying to create some distance. But the damage had already been done. I don't know how long we stood there in silence, both of us locked in a moment that felt like it had been frozen in time. She looked guilty, but also panicked. The guy just stood there, looking at me as though he had no idea what to do or say. He wasn't even sorry. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My mind was racing, trying to process everything in front of me. It didn't make sense. I had known something wasn't right in the weeks leading up to this, but I had brushed it off. Little things, the delayed responses to my messages, the way she seemed a little distant on our video calls, the excuses she made to avoid talking when I needed her most. But I never thought this was the reason. I never imagined this kind of betrayal. The silence between us was suffocating. I glanced down at the floor, my hand instinctively tightening around the flowers I was holding. I had planned on giving her the ring, but now all I wanted was to leave. To disappear from that moment. To rewind time and not make that impulsive decision to surprise her. I could hear her stuttering, trying to explain herself, but nothing she said made any sense. I didn't want to hear her words. I didn't care. I couldn't think straight. Everything I had believed in felt like a lie. My thoughts were jumbled, my heart heavy with anger, betrayal, and hurt all at once. I took a step back, my eyes falling on the small bouquet of flowers and the engagement ring. I looked at them for a long moment before turning my gaze back to her. She was still trying to speak, but I wasn't listening anymore. I didn't want her excuses. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She knew exactly what this meant. I turned and walked away, slowly, carefully, with no more words left to say. The silence was deafening. I went to the hallway outside her apartment and set the flowers, the ring, and the tickets down on the ground. I knew I couldn't stay. Not now. Not like this. I pulled out my phone, took a picture of the 3 items neatly arranged on the floor, and snapped the shot without a second thought. It wasn't for her. It wasn't for anyone. It was for me. Proof of what had just happened. Proof of the end. And without another look back, I left. The next day, I posted the photo on my social media with a simple caption, "When you plan forever, but run into the end." And that was it. I was done. The aftermath hit me like a ton of bricks. The following days felt like a blur of disbelief and confusion. I couldn't stop replaying the moment over and over in my mind, but each time it played out, it became more surreal. I kept asking myself, how did I not see it? How did I miss all the signs? But even as I asked, I knew the truth, because I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to believe that everything we had was real, that the love we shared was enough to overcome any obstacle, no matter how far apart we were. I had invested so much of myself in this relationship, and it felt like my whole world had crumbled in an instant. The shock didn't wear off immediately. I'd find myself pacing around my apartment at night, my mind racing, not knowing what to do next. Should I call her? Should I try to confront her? Should I demand answers? But deep down, I knew what the answers were. There was nothing she could say that would change what I had seen. Nothing could take back the betrayal that was now written in stone. I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone about it. I didn't even know where to begin. How do you explain to your friends, to the people closest to you, that the person you thought was the love of your life had just shattered your trust? The thought of explaining it felt exhausting, like I'd have to relive that horrible moment 1,000 times over. So I kept it to myself for a while, letting the silence sink in and trying to make sense of what had happened. A week later, I was sitting in a cafe, sipping on a coffee and scrolling through my phone when I saw her name pop up in my notifications. It was a message from her. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen. I didn't want to read it. I didn't know what to expect, but a part of me still hoped it was a mistake. Maybe she had a good explanation. Maybe there was a reason. But when I opened the message, it was clear that she wasn't even trying to apologize in a meaningful way. It was as if the entire thing was brushed off, reduced to a simple text. "I'm sorry, but I think it's better if we go our separate ways." That was it. A few words and then silence. No real explanation, no acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. I sat there staring at the message, feeling the anger and frustration rising inside me. Go our separate ways? That was all she had to say after everything we had been through? After everything I had sacrificed for this relationship? All the nights spent apart? All the planning for the future that I thought we were building together? This was how she ended it? I wanted to reply, to send her a message that would make her understand the hurt, the anger, the betrayal I was feeling. I wanted her to know that I wasn't just some guy to be discarded without a second thought. But in the end, I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The words were hollow, and I knew that any further conversation with her would only drag me back into the mess of lies and deceit that I was better off leaving behind. Instead, I did something that felt both cathartic and painful at the same time. I went to her social media profiles. I had to. I don't know what I expected to find, but it was like I was searching for something that could help me make sense of it all. And there, I found it. Pictures of her with the guy from that day. They were posted publicly, as if nothing had happened, as if there had been no betrayal, no realization that her actions had just destroyed the person who would have given her everything. It was like a punch in the gut. Seeing them together made it all real, made it final. It wasn't just the sight of her with someone else that hurt. It was the realization that she had been living a completely different life without ever thinking about the person who trusted her the most. I don't know why, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. It was like I was stuck in this cycle of self-inflicted pain, constantly looking for answers, constantly searching for closure. But deep down, I knew that there was no closure coming from her. There was no apology big enough to erase the damage. No words that could undo the trust she had destroyed. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of everything started to settle in. I was trying to rebuild, trying to find myself again. I started spending more time with my friends, going out, doing the things I hadn't had time for before. But no matter what I did, there was a part of me that felt empty. Something inside me had broken, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. I thought about reaching out to her. I thought about confronting her one more time, asking her how she could do this, How she could betray me and leave me with nothing but the memories of a relationship that was nothing more than a lie. But I realized something important. No amount of confrontation would change anything. No amount of words would bring back what we had, because what we had wasn't real. It was just a version of reality that I had constructed in my head, one that she had been playing along with until she didn't need to anymore. So I let it go. Slowly, painfully, but I let it go. I realized that I was better off without her, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. I had to move on. I had to rebuild my life, piece by piece, without her. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but I started to understand something that I hadn't before. Sometimes the hardest thing in life is letting go of someone who you thought would always be there. And even though it took a long time, I finally found peace. Not because I had gotten any closure from her, but because I had learned to close the door on her myself. I wasn't going to wait for an explanation that would never come. I wasn't going to let her keep taking up space in my head. In the end, I learned that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we never see coming. Time passed, and life started to feel like it was moving forward again. It wasn't immediate, and I still had my bad days, days when I'd wake up and the pain would hit me all over again, or when I'd see something that reminded me of her and feel that familiar sting. But I began to realize that healing didn't mean forgetting, and it didn't mean pretending that nothing had happened. Healing meant finding the strength to keep going, despite what had been done to me. I threw myself into work, into hobbies I had neglected, into friendships I had taken for granted. It wasn't easy, but I could feel myself slowly becoming whole again. The thing about heartbreak is that it teaches you things you didn't know you were capable of. You learn to be stronger than you ever thought you could be. You learn to trust again, not because someone else earns that trust, but because you earn it from yourself. But then, just when I thought I had gotten the hang of things, just when I thought I was over the worst of it, I got a message from her. It came out of nowhere. I was sitting at home, scrolling through my phone after a long day, when I saw her name on my screen. My heart sank. I didn't want to open it. I had moved on from her, from the whole situation. I had built a life that was slowly but surely becoming better without her in it. I didn't need her reaching out. Not now, not after everything. But curiosity won out, and I opened the message. Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about you a lot. I'm sorry for everything. I was selfish. You didn't deserve what I did. I understand if you never want to talk to me again, but I just wanted to say I regret everything. I've been with him for a while now, but I think about you all the time. The words were almost too much to take in. I stared at the screen for a long time, processing everything she had said. The first thing I noticed was how completely it felt like she was talking about someone else's life. There was no real apology. There was no explanation for what she had done. Just a vague admission of regret with a sprinkle of "I think about you" thrown in, as if that made any of it better. I felt disgusted. And not in the way I had once imagined I would. Angry or bitter or seeking revenge, but in a way that made me realize how far I had come. I had moved on, and this message, her reaching out, didn't change that. It didn't undo the pain she had caused, nor did it make me second-guess my decision to let her go. She wasn't the person I wanted to be with anymore, and as painful as it had been to accept that, I knew it was the truth. Instead of replying right away, I set my phone down and took a deep breath. I thought about everything we had been through, everything that had led up to this moment. I thought about the man I was becoming, the person who was no longer holding on to the past, who was finally learning to let go of what wasn't meant for him. I had been angry, hurt, betrayed, and confused for so long. But now I could see things clearly. She didn't deserve my time anymore. She didn't deserve to take up any more space in my mind. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I deleted her message without replying. I didn't feel a sense of victory or satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, it was about giving myself the closure I never got from her. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need anything from her anymore. No answers, no apologies, no excuses. I didn't need her to make sense of it all for me. I had already done that on my own. I had already learned what I needed to from the experience. And most importantly, I had learned to move on without her. After that, life continued on, and it felt different. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I met new people, made new memories, and even found myself in new relationships. But I did it with a heart that had been tempered by the pain and the lessons of the past. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine all the time. There were days when I still thought about her. There were moments when I wondered if she ever truly realized the extent of the damage she caused. But I didn't let those moments control me anymore. The past no longer had a hold on me. The best part? I finally understood that I was enough. I was enough for myself. And that was the most important thing of all. I didn't need to hold on to the past. I didn't need to chase after something that was never meant to be. And I definitely didn't need to keep thinking about a person who had proven, in the harshest way possible, that she wasn't the one for me. In the end, I learned that some of the most painful experiences in life aren't just about the heartbreak itself. They're about the strength you gain from walking away. Months passed, and the pieces of my life slowly started to fit together again, each day getting just a little bit better than the one before. It was a strange sensation, the way time heals. Though it wasn't always linear. There were days when I would feel a wave of sadness crash over me out of nowhere. Days when I questioned my own worth, wondering if I was somehow to blame for everything that had happened. But those days became fewer and farther between, replaced with moments of clarity and self-assurance. It's amazing how, over time, your own resilience starts to show. The wounds from the past don't heal all at once, and it's easy to think that you'll never be the same person again. But then you look up one day and realize that you are different, not in a bad way, but in a way that makes you stronger, wiser, more capable of handling what life throws at you. The things I had learned from that relationship, about love, about trust, about who I really am, became the foundation I started building on, brick by brick, until I was standing tall again, more grounded than ever. But even though I was moving forward, I never truly erased the memory of her. You never completely forget your first love, especially when it's the first time you've ever been truly betrayed. That's a feeling that sticks with you, lingers in the back of your mind, and surfaces when you least expect it. The trick is not letting it control your life, not letting it define who you are moving forward. And I was determined not to let that happen. I had learned that I couldn't live in the past. I had to keep moving forward, keep pushing myself to grow, to evolve, to do the things I once put off for the sake of someone who ultimately didn't care as much as I did. It was time to invest in me, time to take risks and embrace new experiences. Time to remind myself that I didn't need anyone to feel complete. I was enough, all on my own. Then one day, as life continued to move on, something happened that I hadn't expected. I ran into her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't something I was prepared for, and at first, I didn't even recognize her. I was at a cafe, sitting with some friends, laughing about something trivial, when I happened to glance up, and there she was, standing in the doorway. She hadn't seen me yet. Her hair was different, her style had changed, and she looked different, almost like she had been through something too. But she still had that familiar smile, the one I had once fallen in love with, the one I had trusted more than anything. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. I could feel the past creeping back into my chest, that old familiar ache. But then I realized something. I had already moved on. I had already healed. This moment, this encounter, was just a blip in the grand scheme of things. I didn't need to go back to it. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the betrayal. I didn't feel any of those things that had consumed me for so long. Instead, I just felt nothing. And in a way, that was liberating. I had released myself from the weight of her, from the weight of that past. I was free. She caught my eye, and for a second there was a flicker of recognition in her face. She hesitated, but then something shifted. It was as if she knew that I had already closed that chapter, and there was no need to say anything more. No apologies could fix what had happened between us. She gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod, and I nodded back. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was just a moment. And then she turned, walked out the door, and that was that. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace with everything. I hadn't held on to resentment or bitterness. I hadn't chased her down for answers. I hadn't let the past take up space in my life. I had let it go, and in doing so, I had found the freedom I needed to move on. As I sat there, I realized how far I had come. A year ago, I would have been consumed by that moment, by the hurt, the anger, the sense of being wronged. But now I saw it for what it was. A brief interaction with someone who once meant everything to me, but was now nothing more than a reminder of how much I had grown. And that's when I realized something important. Closure doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within. You can't wait for an apology. You can't wait for someone to make things right. You have to do that for yourself. You have to take the steps to move on, to heal, and to find peace in your own heart. It had been a long, painful journey, but I had finally reached a place where I could look back and not feel the weight of what happened. I had my life, my dignity, and the lessons I had learned from the experience. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And with that, I walked out of the cafe, breathing deeply, ready to take on whatever the future had in store. As time went on, my life continued to evolve, and I began to experience things I never would have imagined back when I was caught in the whirlwind of that toxic relationship. I started embracing new challenges, pushing myself to explore parts of life I had once been too afraid to venture into. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly content, without the heavy baggage of betrayal weighing me down. I got more involved with my career, which had always been something I was passionate about, but had put on the back burner while I focused on the relationship. I poured myself into projects, collaborations, and goals that pushed me further than I thought possible. The work became more than just a distraction. It became a driving force, something that fueled my confidence and reminded me of my worth, independent of anyone else. My sense of purpose was no longer tethered to a person who had let me down, and that realization was empowering. With each passing day, I found myself rebuilding trust in people, in friendships, and in the idea of love itself. It was slow at first. I was cautious, unsure if I could ever open myself up again the way I had before. But I met people who showed me that not everyone was going to betray my trust. Not everyone was out to hurt me. Slowly, I started letting walls down, little by little, until I found myself in a healthier, more genuine friendship than I had ever had before. I even started dating again, not in the way I thought I would. I wasn't rushing to fill a void or to seek out someone to replace the woman who had broken my heart. This time, I was dating because I wanted to. I wanted to see what else life had to offer, not to fix myself, but because I had realized I was already whole. I had learned that love, real love, was not about being dependent on someone else to feel good about yourself. It was about sharing your life with someone who enhanced it, not defined it. But the most significant part of this process was learning to forgive. Not her, not for what she had done, but forgiving myself. There was a time when I blamed myself for the things I didn't see, for the moments I ignored the red flags. I would play the what-if game in my head, wondering if I could have done things differently, if I had spotted the signs earlier. But I learned that it was all part of the journey, part of the painful yet necessary lesson I had to learn about trusting my instincts, respecting my boundaries, and valuing myself above all. One evening, months after the encounter at the cafe, I found myself sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset and reflecting on everything that had transpired. I thought about how different my life had looked just a year ago. How lost I had felt, how broken. But now, I saw the strength I had gained, the resilience that had carried me through one of the toughest periods of my life. The sun was setting, and I could feel a sense of peace washing over me. Like the world had shifted in a way that finally aligned with who I was becoming. I had come out of that dark period stronger, wiser, and more self-assured than I ever could have imagined. I was no longer defined by the mistakes of my past or the people who had wronged me. I had come to the realization that I was the one in control of my narrative, and I was writing a new story, one where I was the hero. And just as I was lost in my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was a notification. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I opened it, I saw her name again. It was a simple message. "Hey, I know I don't deserve it, but I just wanted to apologize again. I know it's been a long time, but I regret everything. I hope you're doing well. I sat there for a while, just staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her how much she had hurt me, to say everything I had been holding back for so long. But I realized something. This message wasn't for me. It wasn't an apology I needed, not anymore. I had already healed, and my forgiveness, if it was ever needed, had been granted long before she ever sent this. I took a deep breath, and without a second thought, I deleted the message. There was no need to open the door to that past again. It had served its purpose in teaching me who I was, but I was no longer interested in revisiting that chapter of my life. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Free from the past. Free from the chains of betrayal. Free from the hold that someone else had once had on my heart. As I stood up and looked out over the city, I realized that the future was wide open. The possibilities were endless. I didn't know exactly where life would take me, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because of the past, but because of the person I had become. The one who had weathered the storm, learned from it, and come out stronger on the other side. The one who had let go and moved forward. As the days stretched into weeks, I began to notice something within myself that I hadn't expected. A sense of profound peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from avoiding the past or pretending it didn't exist. No, it was deeper. An inner calm that came from fully accepting everything that had happened, from acknowledging the pain without letting it define me anymore. The anger and hurt that had once consumed me were fading, leaving behind a space for personal growth and clarity. I had learned to stop chasing after validation from others. I was no longer seeking approval or confirmation that my pain had been justified. The fact that I had endured it and come through the other side stronger was all the validation I needed. I started to embrace life more fully. I reconnected with old friends who had been there for me during the dark days. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of going. I took up hobbies I had pushed aside while I was in that relationship. Things I had once loved, but had sacrificed for the sake of someone else. I was starting to build a life that was entirely my own, independent of any past relationship. The freedom I felt was exhilarating. It was like being released from the shackles of my own fear, my own insecurities, and the belief that I needed someone else to complete me. I was enough, just as I was, and I finally understood that. For the first time, I stopped defining myself by the mistakes of others, and instead, I defined myself by my own growth, my own resilience. As I navigated through this new phase of life, I met someone new, a woman who reminded me that love could be something healthy, something genuine. It wasn't about fixing the past or replacing what I had lost. It was about moving forward and building a new foundation with someone who understood that love wasn't about possession or validation. It was about respect, trust, and mutual support. I wasn't looking for perfection. I wasn't searching for someone to heal the wounds of the past. Instead, I was looking for someone who was also whole, who had their own life, their own dreams, and who could bring their own experiences to the table without trying to change or fix the other person. And that's exactly what I found. She didn't try to erase the past, and neither did I. We shared our stories, our vulnerabilities, and the lessons we had learned along the way. We both understood that relationships weren't always easy, but the right ones made you feel supported, seen, and heard, and this felt right. There was no comparison to the past. This was something new, something worth building. But as much as this new relationship brought me joy and hope, I never stopped appreciating the lessons I had learned from the previous one. I had learned the importance of boundaries, the value of self-respect, and the necessity of taking care of myself first before anyone else. Most of all, I had learned to trust myself again, to trust my intuition, and to trust that I would never again ignore the signs of something that wasn't meant for me. I started to see the importance of vulnerability, of allowing myself to love again without the fear of being hurt. It was a conscious choice, one I had to make every day. But with each new day, the fear lessened, and the love I had for myself grew stronger. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at home, reflecting on everything I had been through. The heartbreak, the growth, the strength I had found within myself, When I received another message from her, it had been months since the last one. Part of me had expected this, and part of me had hoped it would never come. It was brief, and yet it hit me harder than I anticipated. I hope you're happy. I wanted to apologize again, but I also wanted to say thank you. You were good to me. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you. I hope you found what you deserve. At first I didn't know how to react. I wasn't angry, nor was I sad. It was almost as if I had been expecting it, and I had already done the emotional work of letting go. She didn't owe me this apology. She didn't owe me anything. But I realized in that moment that this message wasn't for me anymore. It was for her. It was a sign of her own growth, a step in her journey to make amends. And while I could acknowledge that, it didn't change my own path. I didn't need her to fix what had been broken between us, because I had already fixed it for myself. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't need to. What mattered was that I had moved on. I had found peace, not in what she had done or said, but in who I had become. I had finally learned to stop looking for closure from others. I had learned to give myself the closure I needed, not by waiting for someone else's apology, but by choosing to heal on my own terms. And so, I kept moving forward. With every new step, I shed more of the past. I was no longer the person I had been in that toxic relationship, and I was no longer held captive by the pain it had caused. I was free to live my life, free to love in a healthy way, and free to embrace the future with hope and optimism. The past no longer had power over me. I had taken back control. And with that, I could finally say with complete certainty that I was okay. Better than okay. I was thriving.